Welcome to Webinar Wednesdays. Today is Wednesday, February 13th, 2019. My name is Aaron Lurie. I'm the Director of Professional Learning here at NAESP. And today's topic for Webinar Wednesdays is building relationships and playing well with others. Our speaker today is Jennifer Abrams. Let me tell you a little bit about Jennifer. Jennifer is a communications consultant, a former high school English teacher, and a new teacher coach. Jennifer's upcoming book is Swimming in the Deep End. Jennifer, how are you today?
I'm great, Aaron. Thank you for having me. How are you all?
I'm fine. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, Jennifer.
Well, I am, as you mentioned, a former English teacher and new teacher coach. I've been consulting and being an author for the last 5-6 years. I'm based out of Palo Alto, California, where I look outside my window right now, and it is not raining at the moment. But good news is that I'm not in Minnesota, where my family's from, and it's not snowing on me. But that's about me. That's about me. But maybe everybody else here is just at home because they had a snow day. So I feel good.
Now, Jennifer, I see you have a new book coming up. Can you tell us the title of some other books that you wrote, just in case you want to grab them out there?
Absolutely, and I'll mention them in the slides as well. I started in 2009 with a book called Having Hard Conversations. 2013, I wrote a book called The Multi-Generational Workplace. Communicate, collaborate, and create community. 2016, I wrote Having Hard Conversations Unpacked. The who's, the whens, and the what ifs, and then coming out next month is Swimming in the Deep End, 4 foundational skills for leading successful school initiatives, and then I've got 2 others in the hopper.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's a process. It's
great.
A process. Yeah.
Well, everyone is coming muted today, and today we're going to use the chat box if you have any questions or any things that you would like for Jennifer to know about. Okay, so Jennifer, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Aaron. So, welcome everybody. As I mentioned, I'm an author, consultant, and former secondary school and new teacher coach for a school district in Palo Alto, California, Palo Alto Unified. And I'm here, but I'm international, and so people find me on Twitter, and that's my Twitter handle right there. I want to start with just sort of acknowledging and dedicating all my work, as I do, to my nephews who are maybe at school today. They're in Minneapolis, in that area. They're Joe and Evan, and they had snow days last couple of weeks, which I've been told many people have been having, because you just can't get out because you can't go to the bus stop when it's 30 below zero. But the point is that Joe is on the left-hand side, and this is really important to the work that I do. This quote, he looked at me at one point and he said, "You don't work anymore, you just fly around and talk to people." Now, I do fly around and talk to people, but we're going to talk today about how to talk to each other, which I actually think is a worthy use of an hour. And I want to start with this particular slide. Now, this is a slide that really represents what it was like when I moved from the classroom to start working with adults, okay? I was a classroom English teacher for about a decade. I moved to work with new teachers and do professional development across my school district, and I was not prepared, okay? And this is a quote from Terry Pierce. He says, "There are many people who think they want to be matadors only to find themselves in the ring with 2,000 pounds of bull bearing down on them. And then they discover what they really wanted was to wear tight pants and hear the crowd roar." Now, that was me. Now, I know that NAESP members know better than I did, in the sense that you know that it is not always going to be wearing tight pants and hearing the crowd roar. But what I discovered was that I had a credential in how to teach students, and I didn't have a credential in how to talk effectively to adults. And I didn't have a credential in how to communicate and collaborate and create community with my colleagues. And that really led me to writing some of these books about the most challenging kinds of communication that you might have with colleagues, supervising, or in a team. And that led me to these two books that I mentioned a little bit earlier when Aaron and I were talking. But what I really want to talk about today is before those books, before you have a hard conversation, just how do you communicate, period, and why is it so important? And so on page 3 of the packet, which you will have if you signed up for this webinar, it was sent to you, and it's really a piece of what we're going to talk about today. There is a page in there with a quote from Harriet Lerner. And so I'm going to read the quote and just get you kind of in the frame of having communication that I think is really more playing well with others, right? Getting communication skills down. She says, our conversations invent us. And through our speech and our silence, we become smaller or larger selves. And through our speech and our silence, we diminish or enhance the other person, and we narrow or expand the possibilities between us. How we use our voice determines the quality of our relationships, who we are in the world, and what that world can be and might become. Clearly, a lot is at stake here. So I really think that we need to figure out how to use our voice in our collaboration with such thoughtfulness and such humanity, because we are doing it for the students, right? How do we talk to each other? Well, in this agenda today, you have a packet, and in this particular 1 hour, we're going to talk about why we know trust and inventing ourselves with our communication is so important. And I want to share just a little quick thing with you. And then I want to show you a collaboration self-assessment that you could use with your teams, with your schools, with your faculties, about how important it is that we really drill down and know how to collaborate effectively. We're going to briefly look at some adult learning assumptions. And then I'm going to go review the collaboration skills, and there's a bibliography there as well. Now, why does it matter to really focus on the adult-to-adult stuff? I have people that say, you know, I have a lot of PD that's going on in my school. We have to focus on the classroom. We have to focus on curriculum and pedagogy. We've got new initiatives rolling out and a new math program, et cetera, and I don't discount any of that to be really important for schools. But Tony Brake and Barbara Schneider wrote a book called Trust in Schools, and in the packet that I have, I just have a short piece from Harvard Education Review that really makes this hit home. They say that schools with high degrees of relational trust are far more likely to make the kind of changes that raise student achievement than those where relations are poor. I think when you say hello in the front office, it increases student achievement. When teachers are willing and able and have the ability to work with each other, the student achievement goes up. And Brake and Schneider and we know this in our hearts, but Brake and Schneider really looked at it. If you look at Hattie's work, John Hattie and his research meta-analyses around collective efficacy, do we as a community believe that we can help all kids? And can we learn from each other collectively to do that has a huge effect size. So we really have to drill down and make sure that not only do our teachers know how to teach, but how to actually talk to each other. Now, Brake and Schneider on page 5 said, they said something, I said, I've been looking at it, I said, well, what is trust? Because relational trust is really big, right? It's too big. So what does it look like and sound like in practice? So they drilled down and said that relational trust has got 4 factors going on. The first one is, do you demonstrate respect? Okay, because if trust is not a noun and it's a verb, how do we demonstrate respect? Do we acknowledge one another's dignity and ideas? Or do we go, that was a dumb idea? Or do we roll our eyes? Or do we not say hello in the front office? That's huge, right? Okay. Do we demonstrate that we believe in each other's ability and willingness to fulfill responsibilities effectively? Or do we say, oh, you have so-and-so next year for 5th grade? Ooh, but she's nice. That's not demonstrating that you think that that person's got what it takes to teach the kid. How do we share our belief in other people's competence? Okay, and I'll talk about that. Do we care about each other personally and professionally? Do we go past each other and say, how was your weekend? How's your kid doing? I heard that you were gone for a while with a medical challenge. How are you? Okay, so that's a huge idea. And the last one is integrity. How do you demonstrate that you trust each other to put the interest of the student first, even though tough decisions have to be made? Do you gossip when you're moved from 3rd grade to 2nd grade because you don't want to work with those teachers, even though that's really where your skill set needs to be? Or do you discount when somebody goes, yeah, I don't want him, that she's not going to do that. She's never been a team player. Do we demonstrate this trust? So what we've got is a text box. If you go up under share, you'll see a text box, and I want you to click in. Are there some thoughts? I've got a phone right here. I just want you to have looked at page 4 and page 5, and I just want to take 2 minutes if there are any ideas about that before we dig into a deeper way of how you can work on collaboration. Any thoughts or ideas? Yes.
And if I could clarify that, please use your chat box.
Yes, please.
Chat box to write in your comments.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Yes.
That's okay.
Type your message. So we only have like 30 seconds left. I just wanted to see if there were any questions or any ideas from pages 4 and 5 in the packet. This is when people say, why do we need to really work on our skills? Why do we need to work on our adult-to-adult communication? I'm here to teach the children. I'm really good at that. I just don't want to talk to my colleagues all that much. Well, actually, it's essential. It's critical. It increases student achievement, and it's probably and most likely, regardless of where you are in the United States or abroad, in your teaching standards. How you work as a collaborative colleague is essential. It's absolutely essential. So I want to keep going and move into a piece on pages 6 to 8. Now, what happened and why I chose to add this self-assessment to your packet was that I worked, as I mentioned before, as a new teacher coach for 16 years in-house. I now still do a variety of things, going to elementary schools and secondary schools on this all the time, and talk about let's collaborate effectively. Well, people said, well, what exactly does that look like? And I offered to them a self-assessment. My new teachers were being told that they weren't exactly a team player, or they weren't participating in the school community as effectively as they could. And so what I did was I put together on pages 6 to 8 a self-assessment. And I have used this as self-assessment in schools with people just to set the stage. Now, I go in and do hard conversations work, right? So I say, before any of the hard conversations work, are you an effective group member and colleague? Here are some things that you need to consider about yourself so that you're walking your talk, you are as effective as a colleague as you can be in your communication. And so I've asked people prior to any of the other work that I do to use this self-assessment. And I want to offer a minute just to look at the self-assessment and see if there are any questions about it. Do you have any about this self-assessment and how you might use this self-assessment in your school? So we're going to go to a thoughts thing. If you have anything, I'm timing it again. Just want to see if anybody's got some ideas or questions about pages 6 to 8.
So I have a question for you while they're writing, Jennifer. How might you use this to actually come up with ideas for changing yourself? Let's say you score low on this.
Right, right. Well, I think that one of the things that I know that we do in our new teacher coaching or in my work with supervisors is that people set goals and they work with each other on, so what would it look like and sound like if I got better at this? There's a question here actually about how do you balance self-awareness when there's a lack of self-regulation. I think that there is so much to be said about everybody working on their self-regulation. To me, self-regulation is you're impulsive. Self-regulation is that you speak up and you do a reply all when you shouldn't, that you say that you roll your eyes. I think that we need to actually be getting feedback on that in humane and growth-producing ways all the time, and really doing that feedback more often. So at the end of meetings, I actually learned from many of my colleagues that do facilitation, how was your participation in this meeting? Did it enhance or diminish the work that we were trying to do today? And what's your goal for next time? And that's huge. Well, and the question Cindy Bear is asking, how would you initiate the use of the self-assessment when the culture is such that they would feel it would be used against them? Personally, I use it as a self-assessment. I honestly say, let's just be 2 feet in the present, be mindful of this as you move into the year, and then I take pieces of it as norms as we move into it. I don't certainly have it used against them in any supervision because they don't hand in their self-assessment. It is a personal self-assessment at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of the work that I come in to do with folks. So it's not used against them. They don't need to be honest. They can be as, but if I say to them, what are your thoughts about this self-assessment? And if they think the culture is that bad, that's a whole other conversation to have. Okay, that's a whole other conversation that actually might be a part of the next book that I'm doing about intentionally developing adult culture that I'm doing with Bill Summers that'll be out in 2020 with Corwin Press. Okay, now, so I look at that self-assessment and it's about yourself, but I also think we have to be other focused. And so on page 9, I work on this idea of being allocentric, A-L-L-O, allo, other-centric, other-focused, and really being mindful of yourself and other people and the stretch that it takes to learn something. So Linda Lambert actually has 6 of these things. She was a California State University East Bay, on the other side of the bay from me in my area, professor. And I want to highlight 3, okay? Only 3, the first and the last 2. The first one is that adults have a drive toward competence, which is linked to self-image and efficacy. Every adult is going to want to look good. It's embarrassing when something new comes down and you have to realize that you're starting with beginner's mind again. How can we at least make sure that we don't diminish with self-image and all that by rolling our eyes, making a face, starting things and basically saying, this is what we need to do, just get with it, when people really will then just go passive-aggressive on you. So just be mindful. Every adult has a drive toward competence. And let's go to the last 2 on this page. Learning is an opportunity and a risk. It requires dissonance. It's not easy because all of us, last bullet on page 9, are in the continual process of identity formation. That is such a tricky thing because we are teacher of record, we're principal of the school, we got the job because we know better. How can we balance growing and really being pretty competent You know what I mean? It's not an either or kind of thing. I have a wonderful former superintendent who came up in front of all of us as he started his school year with us in Palo Alto years ago, his first superintendency, and said, I just want you guys to know I woke up this morning and I thought, hot dang, I'm the superintendent. I can't believe it. And we were all like, oh no, you don't have time to grow. We need you to lead. And there isn't an either or there. It is that everybody has to be in a process of identity formation. That's a cultural thing. We're all growing. So that's a huge deal of what did you learn today? And where were you on a learning edge? And is everybody there? And as long as we create a culture where we can do that, that's a big deal. Now, I just want to offer another minute. Anything from page 9 that you need to be more mindful of? How could you use this in working with your team? Or what could you concretely change yourself in terms of your behavior with your team? Let's just take 1 minute with page 9. And what I'm going to do is I'll put up the slide and we'll just take 1 minute. How do you see this in your work? And then I'll show you how you can actually support this with collaborative language.
So as we wait for that,
Sure.
This is a lot. This document is just powerful. It has so many things in it. Which one should they focus on? All of them at once, or one at a time?
The first thing that I think is the first bullet and the last bullet. That everybody wants to look competent, and you always have to be in the process of growing into something bigger, okay? And so honor the ego, but also build up a bandwidth in your people as well as yourself to always be on a learning edge. You know what I mean? What are you doing good? What are you doing? And so how do you do that? And that's where we're headed. I mean, I really think that everybody says we've got to focus on the curriculum, we've got to focus on the pedagogy, we've got to focus on what's going on in the classroom. Well, we got to do that in community. We got to work with each other. That in and of itself is a tricky deal. We got to build up a skill set to do it. That's really the key.
Makes sense.
And so how do we do that? Okay. Well, on page 10, I'm going to go into the pages 11 and 12 and all that kind of stuff. But on page 10, I just want to offer you a set of norms for collaborative work. Now, I just want to do a shout out to a group called the Thinking Collaborative, thinkingcollaborative.org. They taught me everything I know about this work. It was Bob Garmston and Bruce Wellman, as well as Bob Garmston again and Art Costa, who taught me how to coach and facilitate. And they merged and they became the Thinking Collaborative. The Thinking Collaborative talks about adult-to-adult communication. And it doesn't presuppose that the teachers in your school or you as an admin have background in how to be effective in groups. It does teach you how to consider your language in terms of collaboration. And on page 10, it asks us to consider if we're paraphrasing. So Dale mentioned in the text box, how do you balance self-awareness when there's a lack of self-regulation? If somebody's shouting out, if somebody's rolling their eyes and they're not paraphrasing and they're not posing questions and they're not asking questions as much as advocating for themselves, which is sort of a lack of self-regulation. I'm just going to talk on and on and on. There's a skill that we've got to teach. Do we pay attention to ourselves as well as to other people? There is work to be done just on page 10. And in this particular webinar, I want to show you a couple things, okay, that'll I'm going to go deep dive into some of the stuff that's in the page 10. Now, it seems silly to some people, okay? But on page 11, I ask people to consider their body language, how they are non-verbally in connection and rapport with other people? Are they sitting at the meeting, which I myself am not, perfect at this. I've sat at meetings with my arms folded. I've sat at meetings looking at my phone. I've sat at meetings where I'm yawning or sighing or not wanting to be there. And so how are we at the table? Do we create a space for each other? Are we slow? Are we slowing down? Are we too fast? I have dear friends who look at each other, really fascinating, angry. They're not angry though, they're interested, but they scare people with their face. They scare people with their face. They're so interested, but they look intimidating. I've got people that roll their eyes. I have people that are too in your physical space. What I laugh about is that, and I say this with great respect to LA Unified School District, LA Unified has a norm for their administrators in one of their groups, because they're District 5, and they were District 5, maybe they're, I don't know what they are, maybe they're with, maybe they're, I don't know, East, North, South these days, but they had a norm. The norm for the administrators was elbows on the table. Elbows were on the table because they wanted people in the meeting. They didn't want them texting under the table. They wanted them close. They wanted them to be engaged. I've had people say, take out the desks, take out the table, let's just sit knee to knee and be together. So for me, you got to watch it for sure, because if you're distracted, you're out of it. If you've got tension because you're having a hard conversation about something, got to watch your rapport. You also have to watch, and then I'll stop and we'll take a pause just to see if anybody's got some questions. You got to watch your eye listening. I have to work on this. You got to, as you're in your collaboration, are you, when people offer up an idea, go, oh, I used that last year. And you know what, now that I think about it, it didn't work. When I was teaching that, and you go all autobiographical, not actually helpful all the time, nor is gossiping. Oh, you know what, I did that last year, and you know who didn't do that last year? So-and-so. Thank goodness she's not working here anymore. And you know what, I heard she didn't get a job, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And you gossip. In collaborative moments, there is a space for your story as helpful, or for information about individuals in order to help the group. It's not helpful to gossip just for gossip's sake, or to go to solution all the time. You know what we need to do about that? We don't have time to be talking about this. I can't really sit in dialogue about this. I got other things to do. Let's just decide. And in fact, I think we should just do this. Boom. And you go to solution. It's not always helpful to do that either. It isn't wrong. It is just a moment in time to ask yourself, what are my reasons for saying this? And does it serve the person or the group to hear it? So I offer to you just to be aware of this. And you could put this at the bottom of any meeting agenda on a slide and just say, let's remember, be mindful, be mindful. So we've got our body language, we've got our listening. We also have how we actually listen and check for understanding. I always giggle about this. If a question is asked, do I pause and wait for an answer? That I think is, or do I just go, hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? Good, good, okay. And I answer the question for you. I never allow for anybody to answer a question because I've got places to be and things to do. I think if it's really important, we pause and then we paraphrase. So I'm getting a sense from the group that da-da-da. Are we good with that? Or I see that we really value this. We've got to actually stop and check for understanding. Some people paraphrase too much, and we go back to the 70s and we start doing, well, I hear you're saying da-da-da-da-da. Or we nod and we go, I feel you, yeah, absolutely, and we parrot and we parrot and we parrot. And because we want somebody to have the sense that we're there. That just annoys people. So inappropriate paraphrasing isn't good. No paraphrasing isn't good. But just being mindful of our body language, how we listen, how we check for understanding, all huge, okay? Now, before we get into the key questioning skills, just before that, I would love to take just 1 minute. I've got my phone. Any questions just on pages 11, 12, or 13? Anything you're noticing? Is it starting? Are you going, ouch? You're having a saliva moment like, ooh, that hurts. I don't see that. Okay. William says, I like the idea of pausing. I feel like I have to move fast to honor everyone's time. Honoring their feelings is important. I totally agree. I want to honor everybody's time. And that's actually a generational thing as well. I don't know how old you are, William, but I got to tell you that people are like, hey, if we could have Google Doc this, we didn't need this meeting anyways. So I'm always honoring people's time. I actually think honoring deep thinking and hearing from people is also honoring people. And it's a tricky thing. We don't need to pause all the time. We just need to pause when it's important. You know, is it worth our time to check? Don't we teach wait time? We teach wait time to teachers, but we don't teach it to adults. So I'm going to stop for just 20 seconds, see if you guys have anything to add.
This is good stuff, Jennifer.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We're going to keep going in just a few, but I just want you to recognize this is not stuff people think about on a day-to-day basis unless it's a part of the culture. And it is so pivotally important, as we heard from Breikenschneider at the beginning. All right. Now, how do you ask a question that people want you to that they actually want to answer? So on page 14, I have a bunch on questioning. Okay. When you ask a question, same thing. Pause and wait for an answer. I look at this in a classroom, right, with students who are English language learners who are translating into a different language. Do you have colleagues who are not native English speakers? Do you want them to engage? They might need a minute. If you have a deep enough question that requires people to self-assess and then check out the culture, should I be able to answer? You got to pause. I giggle that when I'm in Canada, and I love going to Canada, they want to sincerely answer with such thoughtfulness that they will sit in the pause with me. And then I go like this, is the mic on? Is the mic on? And somebody finally raised their hand and said, we're trying to be respectful and give you an answer that's thoughtful, Jennifer. Could you just give us a second? And I was like, I'm sorry. Right. So if I ask a question and I really want a thoughtful answer, you've got to pause. I also want to ask a question in an approachable way. I don't want to go, so does anybody have any thoughts about this as we move on, and look at my watch with a completely not approachable voice? I think that's terrible. So I want to look like and sound like I'm asking a question. I don't have to sound like a Valley girl from San Diego to have an approachable voice, but I want to sound really like I'm interested. I want to offer the person an opportunity to not get it right. And so one of the ways that I do that, and actually two of the ways that I do that, is that I offer an out in the way that I ask a question. Because remember that competency and self-image piece. So what could be a way that we could approach this? What's a possibility? Not the be all and end all, but what's an option that we could look at? Which gives it, as opposed to, so what do we need to do next? What are you doing about this? That limits, whereas plural forms and tentative language offers an out, offers it not to be perfect. So as we move forward, what do we think could be where we're headed? What are some of our ideas on that? And then be quiet. I know that I love this. I want to honor everybody's time, so let's get an answer. Let's go. I think it also freaks people out because they got to get an A in answering. They also, and remember this competency thing and trusting the integrity of other people and sharing with other people through what we say our belief in their competence, I really want you to look at the bottom of page 14. Use positive presuppositions, okay? Now, a positive presupposition is on the bottom of page 14. It's also on the slide that's in front of you right now. And it has to do not only with the visual that I'm showing you, but it will in just a second include all of the language that's on the bottom of page 14. A positive presupposition presumes and really believes that that goldfish is going to make it, okay? That they've got what it takes, okay? And how do we do that verbally in our communication? How do we share our belief in other people's competence? If I said to you with an honesty, so given you taught this grade for a while, and you've got some expertise here, what are your thoughts on that? Or considering you've done this before and you know the content pretty well, what are your ideas? I'd love to hear where not to mess up, or you know this unit, and you've worked with these students last year. So as you've worked with the students, what's important to you, or what's important to me, or what should be important to me? I'm seeking your guidance, okay? These are presuppositions. As you go through the bottom of page 14, all of these question starters, trust that the person has some brain power, okay? How do you see this working out? Trust that somebody sees where they're headed. Okay? And I look through this and I think if you do this authentically and sincerely, it really does show trust. If you don't do it sincerely, it doesn't do that, because I might say it in a really snarky way. Okay? So considering you know so much about this, what are your ideas? It's kind of snotty. It's not with that tone. It's with a true tone, okay? So that's really where I want us to consider, how do we do it? So before we get to, and I mean like we're almost at the end, before we get to the next page, I just want to stop for a second. Any questions on presuppositions? Have you helped people build this into their culture? Let's just take 30 seconds to see. And I could get a little comment from Honor as well. So who knows what's going to come up.
I can see using these materials to actually build your culture the right way.
Yeah. It takes a minute, doesn't it? I mean, yeah. I want to leave it on the field for NAESP. So I'm leaving this for you because it's so important, because I will show you in a slide or two that I'm coming for the conference to do a Having Hard Conversations session. I think prior to that, we've got to have this in place. You know what I mean? We've already built up an emotional bank account. And so I look at this and I think it's really important. Now, I apologize here. Honor, tell me, do I have this on page 16 or on page 15 in the packet? I think it's on page 15.
Yeah, I see it on 15.
Yeah, so I apologize. I have the wrong page number here, but I have the right stuff. So go back a page before. How do you offer a suggestion? How do you offer something from what people would say in coaching, a consulting stance? Because coaching is about question asking. But what if you want to offer an idea, your expertise, your information that you have based on your history with something? I call that offering people a suggestion from a consulting stance. You're given your input. I always think as a collaborative colleague, I need to offer it in a spirit of support and in an invitational way. And so I always offer them as a suggestion. And then I always say, this is multi-generational story time. So this is the deal. I'm a Gen Xer. I was born in 1967. I'm going to be 52 years old next month. I work with a number of people that are baby boomers born between 1944 and 1964. Could be 1960 to 61, 64. That's a whole other conversation. 1944 to 1960, 64, right? That group. Baby boomers were raised to give feedback diplomatically and suggestively and invitationally. And yet, that's not what they meant. So I want you to think about this. Have you ever been in a supervisorial post observation or post evaluation meeting, and somebody said to you, well, as we look at just possible areas of growth, you might want to think about something to keep in mind is something to put on the back burner, something that you might want to consider, a suggestion could be, and you offer suggestions. I'm just worried. I think they're wonderful. I think they're great suggestions that you want to offer. I'm just worried you didn't mean it. I'm worried that you offered it in a suggestive tone, but you really meant do it. And you had an expectation in your mind that you were going to get them to do it before the next evaluation. I really want you to know that suggestions, if stated as suggestions, need to be offered as suggestions, invitational. If they're owned, if they're offered, and they're taken, great. If they're not, that's fine. My generational work that I've been doing with millennials who can vote you off the island and vote you off Dancing with the Stars and vote, pretty much create an app and then pretty much run their own school, might say to you, oh, that's a really interesting suggestion. It doesn't work for me, but thanks anyway. And I don't want you to feel upset about that. Okay? I don't want you to feel upset about it because how did they not know that they should do it? If you, and I mean this, if you have a mandate, a must, a non-negotiable, an absolute, a requirement, how we do things, you cannot offer it in a suggestive way. Being clear does not mean that you're mean, okay? Mean is not clear, and clear is not mean. So I worry that if we offer suggestions, we're not really offering suggestions. And people don't have to take our suggestions, right? So I just want to put those out there. And there's a whole thing about putting something on the table. On page 10, in the packet under collaborative norms, there's just putting an idea on the table. One thing that we could consider could be, and you leave it there. And if people take it, they take it. And if they don't, they don't. If we have to come to a decision at the end of this meeting and it has to be done and we have 5 more minutes, suggestions, I don't know. That's kind of a tricky one, okay? So here we go. I'm going to put up this slide, and it's still page 15, and I'm sorry, and look at my chat box because there is a comment here. Being a new principal and having a lack of authoritativeness or friendly mannerisms can appear to seasoned teachers as a person being unprepared. How can a new principal come across to their staff as professional and still have great rapport? Well, there is so much to that question. I think that we could look at, oh my gosh, in the bibliography, I bet I have something called the choreography of presenting, which is about your nonverbals of being credible and then approachable and being able to do that. I think that friendly can come across, I think that too authoritative can come across as just they're just a rookie, and I think that too friendly can come across as you're just a rookie. So I don't know your staff, whoever asked this question. I don't know if we say a new principal coming across to seasoned teachers, I'd need to know, honestly, as a generationally savvy person, are we looking at a lot of Xers here? Are we looking at a lot of boomers here? Who is your informal person? What is, who has power but not formal power? How are they needing to you to communicate? And I've got a bunch of stuff in my Swimming in the Deep End stuff about how to be more allocentric and pitch your way depending on who you're talking to. I think that that's a huge deal. Okay. Now, before we move on, I'm going to move that over. There is just one more thing, and then I'm going to share with you the bibliography and then highlight something. Let's actually, any quick thoughts about suggestions before we go to a Q&A, and I've shown you the last number of things. Any questions about suggestive stuff?
So Jennifer, I have a question for you about the timing of using suggestions versus when not to. And I'm assuming if there's any kind of formal evaluation work, you probably get to want to not make as many suggestions as
right.
But how do you couch that, you know, in terms of being nice versus?
So I think if it's a formal evaluation, depending on who you're talking to, you still may say, I really think working on some more smoother transitions, making sure your procedures are clear. Let's say I'm working on classroom management with a teacher. We got to get those transitions smoother. We got to get the procedures more crisp. We got to kind of make those clear, and need to take a look at how the kids leave the class. What are your thoughts about that? Something has to be done. I have a few ideas on that. What are your ideas? So you could coach, but then you could say, you know what? Okay, I have a couple of suggestions. They're not mandates, but something does. You know what I mean? Like the bigger thing needs to be done, but here are the suggestions underneath. And I might offer a variety of ideas and then say, does any of this work for you? Bring it right back to the person, because it's going to have to be on the evaluation. But what I'm offering as possibilities for his or her style might be an option. And
suggestions.
They have to choose something. They have to do something. Do you see what I mean? Like doing something is not up for discussion. How you do something is up for discussion.
Great. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to get to just making sure, and I apologize, it was page 15 and not 16 in my slides, my fault. There is a bibliography review on 16 to 18 that if you want to look at those and you need anything from there, let me know. The visual looks awfully intimidating. And I did not mean for that to be the case. This is something that NAESP and I talked about just to have as a finish up the workshop. And I just thought I'd add, and I'll respond to something that's on the chat box in just a second. Instead of a Q&A, I have here what's become clearer to you about playing well with others and what's still fuzzy. And I take this from Ralph Waldo Emerson. I was an English teacher, and so he used to ask the question, what's become clearer to you? And I offer that as my way of saying, let's do some Q&A before the last two slides. One of the questions was, what is the politically correct response to suggestions not being implemented? That is a great question. I think suggestions not being implemented, politically correct, I would say I would rephrase those suggestions, go back, ask if you noticed that these suggestions weren't being implemented. Was there anything getting in the way of them doing it? And they might say, well, it didn't just really fit my style, or I didn't have enough time. You're really kind of assessing if it's a skill or will thing. But the other thing might be that you need to have a conversation that is more directive and consultative, where you honestly say, okay, I need to be we're going to up the ante on this. These are not suggestions. These are not recommendations. These are expectations. Okay? It's not a could do or you might want to think about doing, it has to be done. So do you understand there's the difference, and see that you would get a check for understanding, and then say, is there any other additional question given that this isn't going off your plate that you need to ask me in terms of supports you might need, or resources you might need, or help you might need, coaching in order to make this happen. So that to me is that we're asking, maybe they really wanted to and they just didn't have the stuff, so keep it at a suggested level. And then if they really are like, nah, didn't really work for me, I need to actually change my language. So I need to change my language from suggestion to expectation.
A comment has come into the question and answer box. I think it's really interesting. It says, in my principal certification program seminar on Saturday, we utilized your outcome map to prep for a hard conversation. We needed to revisit the humane aspect of this conversation in addition to the growth producing.
Yes.
Defining humane and keeping that at our forefront was key. Thank you for breaking down that before. I have a question following up on that.
Yes.
How do you define humane?
Perfect. Well, she was a plug, in my audience here. So we're going to talk about that for a whole day at the pre-con in Spokane. I'm hoping that this is the pre-con that we'll do. How do you define humane? I speak to humane as being neutral, fair, connected to standards, language that really has been vetted, maybe spoken to somebody else, and has not had a saliva moment. So a saliva moment is when, I say to you, you're just a pain to work with. You're just a hot mess. You're a train wreck. And you hear the saliva, okay? I think that humane would be, let me give you an example. If you were supposed to call me yesterday, and I call you back and I say, I didn't hear from you, I didn't receive a call, that's more humane than you chose to deliberately ignore our agreement and you blew me off. What's your problem? Which is how people actually, in a non-humane moment, talk about the same action, but do it in an inhumane way. And so we add adjectives, we add adverbs, we use verbs that assume motivation. And I think that if we could align our conversations with words that are more neutral, connected to professional expectations, chances are you're going to be more humane. And so we'll talk more about that for sure at the pre-con for sure.
Wonderful.
Anything else? Anything? I'm so glad somebody used the outcome map this weekend. Yay. It's in the yellow book. I'm so glad. Thank you. Anything else?
So what, just give me, for an early career principal, and those that might, look at this and go, wow, I need a lot of improvement. You talk about principals talking to teachers, but what recommendations or strategies would you have for them improving themselves? I mean, is there?
I would encourage you to continue to look at, many of the stuff that's, much of the stuff that's in the bibliography of this just brief short thing, looking at pages 6 through 8 and making sure that they're living the collaborative norms on page 10 before they even try to get into anything that's more directive. Now, come to your conference, learn how to facilitate, learn how to coach, learn how to lead professional development. I think that what I've discovered is that in credential programs, admin programs, the adult-to-adult communication soft skills are not given as much emphasis, and I understand there's instructional leadership and understanding the budget and special ed and understanding what's going on in, with state law, hugely important pieces of work. Where I think that new leaders get tripped up is in adult-to-adult communication. And so my next book on leading school initiatives, my other books on having hard conversations, it's just about trying to talk about how we talk, just like my nephew said. You know, you don't work, you just fly around and talk to people. That's what principals do every day. They fly around the school and they talk to people. They talk to parents, they talk to support staff. I think that's something that needs to be emphasized in a new administrator's work as they work on themselves in their first couple of years.
Well, on behalf of NAESP, we'd like to thank you, Jennifer, for the information that you've shared. Of course, we're going to be waiting for you in Spokane for that pre-conference session. Again, can you mention the books one more time for us,
Sure.
Your previous books and the books that's coming out, so that people can be prepared?
Absolutely. So Hard Conversations, which is on the screen right now, but I'm going to go to this. You can find any of the books or any of the work on my website. The Deep End book, we just got the cover, so it's going up there. Hard Conversations Unpacked, The Multi-Generational Workplace, Swimming in the Deep End. It's all there, and you can always find me on my website or write me an email. I swear I respond to people pretty darn fast, Jennifer@jenniferabrams.com or www.jenniferabrams.com. Conversation should continue and can continue.
All right. On behalf of our Executive Director, Earl Franks, and our Associate Executive Director of Professional Learning, Gail Morgan, we'd like to thank you. My name is Aaron Lurie, Director of Professional Learning here at NAESP, as well as my partner behind the scenes, Honor Feedy. We'd like to thank you again, Ms. Abrams, for coming and sharing this information. We'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and catch us next month at Webinar Wednesdays for another impactful speaker. You have a good one, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.